do it. Hello and welcome to Creativity Conversations. This is episode 26 and I'm with the lovely and talented Joelle Lydon. Hello, Joelle.
Hello.
Lovely to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You know, I usually start these conversations with reading somebody's bio, and I'm just going to preface that with saying that part of our project in doing these conversations is deconstructing what creativity is. And with Joelle, we have lots of opportunity to do that because she is such a multi-talented individual. So I am still going to read her bio, but we're going to go way beyond that.
Okay.
Joelle is a mentor, coach, teacher, artist, writer, highly sensitive and unshakable optimist. She's created socially conscious mentorship programming that supports women who are ready to break their own self-imposed rules. Yay. Through coaching, training, and intentional creativity processes, she helps women dream big and back it up with inspired action. Joelle is also passionate about a series of seemingly unconnected things: writing, dance, neuroscience, psychology, quantum physics, creativity, art, spirituality, and healing. So we are on the same page with that. Now, Joelle has been featured at Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts, worked on a team with Heather Dominick, the founder and leader of the highly sensitive leadership movement, featured in Healthy Life magazine, Albany Times Union, Life at Home magazine, Blog Talk Radio, Time Warner Cable News, Fox News, 1 Million Cups, the Carey Institute for Global Good, Minnowbrook Conference Center, and the Capital Region Teacher Center, among many other places. So where shall we begin? Where would you like to begin?
Well, I'm going to follow your lead. I think that, it's my first invitation to these kinds of conversations. And I'm really curious about this project for you and looking for people who are doing things in their lives, but how they weave in creativity and just having a conversation about deconstructing creativity and what that means. So I'll follow your lead.
All right. Golly, you've done so many different things. It's a little bit hard to choose, but I first of all want to ask you about optimism, because it seems to me optimism is a good grounding for being creative.
So it's so funny that that's where you're going to start. I remember many years ago, this is like many years ago, one of the books that my ex-mother-in-law gave me was about optimism. And gosh, I cannot remember the name of the book. It was something that was a bestseller. And I remember feeling really confused by this gift. And then recognizing it was really more of a reflection of what she needed more than what I did. But I feel like, optimism for me has just been a non-negotiable.
Mhm.
Because the alternative is not a good one. So there is value in having vigilance around one sense of optimism. For me, it's been sort of a lifelong journey of being able to try to stay on that side of the coin, because the other part was also very seductive. So depression was always seductive. These other things were always very seductive. So in the last, 10, 20 years, I've worked diligently at staying on this end of the spectrum, and to live my life by looking at even in the most difficult moments, the learning opportunities that are inherent within and inform those moments for me and for anybody else, for my clients, and beginning to support them in being able to see things in that way rather than a crisis or feeling victimized by it, but just really, it was like, whoa, this is fascinating. what's the learning in here for me? Why? Yeah, what's the learning here?
Yeah.
How can I grow? What needs to shift? So, yeah, so that's my long answer to your short question.
I'm glad you gave it. Early on in our conversations, I was speaking with a wonderful woman, Kathleen Fife, who you may know,
Mhm,
and her tagline is "What else is possible?" which I just thought was the bee's knees.
mhm,
You know, it's not about getting stuck and thinking we're going to be stuck permanently, or this is bad, or this is wrong, or this is ugly, but this is just the way it is in the moment. So what else is possible? And
mhm,
I just loved that point of view. She was talking about it in terms of in the context of leadership, but it really is true for whether we're, you know, up to our elbows in paint, or we're writing, or we are performing, or whatever it is that living, just living life, making a cup of tea.
mhm. Absolutely, and I think also the energy of optimism
Mhm.
has a more expansive field to it,
Yeah.
whereas pessimism, if we're going to go like the polar opposite, or depression, um, has very sort of laser, small, pinhole kind of focus, that does not allow for create access to creative solutions and
Yeah.
possibilities. So yeah, for sure, it's a much funner, if that were a word. I'm making it
It
up.
is a good word. Let's
It is
use
a
it.
good word. It's a much more fun place to spend time in, to inhabit, to like lead one's life from.
Yeah. Give me 3 words that would define for you, or put another facet on the word creativity.
Connection, agency,
Mm, good one.
um, fulfillment.
I love all those words. So can we unpack that?
Would love to.
Connection. Tell me
So when
about
I
that.
think of creativity, so it comes for me in many different forms. So I'm a painter, I'm a writer, I'm a dancer, and I create lots of programming for my clients. So when I think of being in that space of creation, for me, there's this connection both to my intuitive, what I call my intuitive intelligence, which is a deep and also direct connection to source. So when I think of being in that space of creativity, it is honoring what's meant to happen as a result of what is emerging. And then there's this place of connection to faith
Mm.
and trust in the process of creating, um, which, of course, develops your confidence in all areas of your life. So for me, that's the connection piece. It's just connection to one's intuitive guidance, one's intuitive intelligence, which is another way of saying connection to the divine.
I love that. How do you incorporate that with the work that you do with women? And do you work exclusively with women?
I do not. I work with men and women.
Enlighten
It
me,
is,
Ben.
I do too. They're fun. It feels like it's who I am, and therefore it's what I do. It's weaved into everything. It's in the fabric of everything that I create. There is no separation for me between my sense of spirituality and my own personal internal guidance, and being able to support in my clients in cultivating theirs. So the people that I work with, both men and women, are highly spiritual by nature.
Mhm.
And so that's who I attract, because that's who I am. And everything that is weaved into all of the programming that I create. And so, yeah, so that's related back to that connection piece.
Mm. Can you give me an example of how you do that?
To begin with the language that I use.
Mm.
So from the onset, with a connection with a, let's say, a prospective client, they need to fill in an application to be able to have a conversation with me. And
Mhm.
this gives me an opportunity to assess whether they're a match to what I do or not. Within that application, I lay it all out. I'm like, this is how I roll. Are you cool with that or not? And so if the answer is yes, it's a go ahead. If the answer is no, I'm not the person to work with them.
Yeah.
So from the onset, we do that. And so once my clients are rolled into programming, the place where the spirituality piece comes forward is in being able to support them using creative processes so that they can access their own.
Mm.
So it's not my imposing my values or spiritual beliefs or um, anything of that's not. I just creating an open space for them to be able to experience that for themselves. And so it comes through the experiential exercises that I assign to them, and it also comes through the creative processes that I've pre-recorded for them or that I lead them through, where they actually have the opportunity to have a body felt sense of what it means to be in that space
Yeah.
where maybe tears come forward because there's just such like, whoa, the energy of this is so big. My body is so small. I can't hold all of that within me. And so the eyes, the tears come out in just the overflow of that energy. Um, so yeah, that would be how I include it.
Have you been influenced by Michelle Kassou's work, intuitive painting work?
No.
I just found a book that I must be 25 years old that she wrote called Paint, Passion, and something else. But she describes a very similar experience for people that she's worked with as she's taught them to create with process as the goal, not the product. And that aliveness that comes through is something most people don't have an experience of in their lives because they're so focused on having a product to
Mhm.
show at the end, which completely bypasses that experience of getting in there with a direct experience of paper, paint, movement, feeling, and all of the emotions that come with that when you realize no rules,
Mhm.
just life coming through.
Absolutely. So I have an expressive arts background. So that's where that comes in. And I'm also an intentional creativity. I have an intentional creativity background, both of which are very process oriented.
Tell me about that intentional creativity, because I'm not familiar with that, and it sounds very intriguing.
It is. It's lovely. It was one of these. It was yeah. So intentional creativity is an opportunity to use a 13-step process to create an image
Mhm.
um, through many layers. That hang on, let me make sure I'm, because it's like expressive arts. How do you even describe that to anybody? Because it's so experiential, right? So you get to curate an image that is a representation of your inner landscape. And it's a way of beginning to um, own and curate your image by your design versus looking at the images of women and men that are out there that we are told we need to fall under the fall under the guise of, like, this is a socialized self, this is what socially, this is what's acceptable, you need to be this thin, you need to be this pretty, you need to be that, all these sort of definitions. And so intentional creativity is a process that allows you to through a 13-step process, create an image for yourself that you get to curate for yourself, that is a true representation of who you are. So if you look behind me, I'll lift my camera up a little bit. These two images behind me are
Yeah.
two intentional creativity processes that I use. This is the first piece. Over here was the first piece that I created. So internal landscape,
Great. Yeah.
right? And that was the next piece that I created. So, and related to my muse, if you will, to that intuitive intelligence. So that's really a representation of what she looks like. So you won't find that image in a newspaper. You won't find that image in a magazine. You won't find that, and you won't find another woman creating an image like that.
Mhm.
That one's only, it's relevant and significant and meaningful to me. So intentional creativity allows a woman and a man and men also to be able to curate an image for themselves that are a true representation of what's going on internally.
Mhm. Would that change over time?
Absolutely. Currently, I'm working on this. So this was done a year ago. I'm currently working down in the basement through the same process to see, over the last year, what stories have been sort of peeled back and what's ready to emerge now. So I'm really curious and super excited about working with this. And I'm only on step 2 right now of the 13 steps, which is like so much fun.
What happens if you forget a step? Sounds like a lot of steps in there.
Well, I trained for 9 months to be
Mhm.
able to. So this is just, yeah. So I've just, you
It all
memorize
flows
it,
together.
and it all flows together.
Uh-huh.
And it's just so much fun to be able to lead a group of people through this process as well.
And you did that in a workshop recently, didn't
I
you?
have. I did a couple of workshops recently. And what was so much fun was that each woman left with an image that was so vastly different from the other, right? So, which really speaks to the process component of this and what each woman brings to the canvas. And, from an outsider's perspective, looking at this as a product,
Mhm.
would say, well, that looks like a child's thing, or this looks like and they would have all kinds of judgments. But every woman who left that event was in love with her canvas,
Mhm.
was just so much had gone in there, had gotten composted inside of it. There was so much meaning that was placed inside of that she was completely in love with the image. And that's the idea, is that through the process of using intentional creativity and expressive arts and any of the other modalities that I use with my clients, each client gets to fall in love with themselves.
Mhm. That's something we sure need more of these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it seems, I'd love to know what you think about this. It seems like that falling in love with oneself is really falling in love with something larger at the same time. In terms of, well, there's such a freedom to it. It's not like, see how great I am and, I am woman, hear me roar. But it's so much more inclusive than that. It, from the way you're describing it and from what I know about the creative process is it's not just look what I can create, but look at who I am in a much larger context. Yes, it's the specifics of my life and my life experiences. And yet at the same time, it's still connected to that creative force, that inspiration, that thing, that force that makes the sky blue and the grass green. It's got it's just big.
Well, I think what happens, so I love how you're speaking about the posturing because I mean there's a whole lot of that in our culture of like, I am woman, like they're trying, like people are trying to convince themselves.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
woman, hear me roar. Um, and this process is so much more than that. I mean, that's like we blow it up and we throw it out and stick it in the garden, compost it, and plant new shit in there. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, we've had plenty of four-letter words on these
Okay, awesome.
conversations.
I'm not the first.
No, I'm
So
glad.
the difference here really is that a woman then, in the process of kind of working through that posturing that she's been socialized into, a man has been socialized into, no longer needs to like say, I'm going to show you who I am. They just are.
Yeah.
And that need to prove, that need to explain, justify, show is kind of taken off the table, because they just are different. There is a sense of approval and appreciation for the entire range of expression of who they are, and an appreciation of who they are. Um, Whereas they may have come to me feeling very fragmented and disavowing and disowning the shadow aspects of who they are, or perceived shadow aspects,
Mm.
and being able to take all of those shadows and just totally own them, right? And then there's no need to prove anything to anyone.
That burden of thinking that I am not enough, or I'm broken, or I'm wrong disappears in that process, because from the way you're describing it, and there's so many things that you and I are both on the same page about, is that it becomes experientially an all-inclusive experience and understanding. So if I'm the creative force of the universe as it's being expressed through me, how could I ever not be enough? How could I ever really be fragmented? How could I really ever be broken? I've got everything here. And it's learning how to bring it out, as you're saying.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, I mean, for many people, and I meet lots of people who speak those words, but don't embody that
Yeah.
because it's still very much an intellectual concept. And what I think creativity does is take that from an intellectual construct into an embodied and integrated and completely synthesized. I'm not using the right word, but like it's
I like
completely integrated and embodied experience and way of being. So it's no longer this fragmentation that happens between the mind and the soul, the body, the intuition, but it's the two of them working together. So your inner critic, your inner mean girl, your inner, mean one, and your wisest, most loving self actually are in conversation with each other. And then there's no need for that fragmentation. There's no need to disavow or to disown or to find yourself wrong for anything,
Yeah.
because everything is just a learning opportunity.
Right.
Right?
Right. No
Going back
good or
to that,
bad.
right? So back to that optimism piece, it's like, you know what? This is here as a learning opportunity. Wow. Wow. We get to redo it over and over and over again. It's genius how everything's been set up.
Yes.
So that's what I'm mostly concerned with working with my clients, is that the separation between head and the rest of us, right? is beginning the process of that integration, and
Mm.
using art as a way, and using education as a way, and using experiential exercises as a way, and using, mentorship as a way. um, yeah.
Yeah. Love it. What I've seen with the clients that I work with is that that experience, that direct experience brings it brings something that sounds a little bit paradoxical, but one aspect that I see is this grounding, this unshakable grounding. And the other is this expansive, I can go anywhere and I'm safe. I don't have anything to worry about. I'm at home with all of it. And that kind of freedom, especially right now where people are just retreating and they're exhausted by the pandemic and the politics and the climate change and their their own sense of connection to something greater has shrunk because the immediacy of these fears or angers or whatever the feelings are that are coming up are obscuring that incredible potential that we all have. And once people have that direct experience, they can't not see it anymore. It's like being in one of those magic circles, that once you step out of the circle, you see where you've been and there's no way you can go back in it again.
Hmm. Yeah. I think, you bring up fear, which is a big piece in the line of work that we do, right? And you've got the outside fear, you've got like situation, pandemic, social injustice, I mean, racial
Yeah.
injustice, you've got, presidential things going on, and people uncertain of who to trust.
Yeah.
And they don't can't even they can't trust because they don't trust themselves, because the voice that has been sort of disconnected from that creative source
Mm.
has been atrophied. That part of themselves has been atrophied, and therefore their access to another voice, another way of seeing things, is not as available to them, and therefore
Mm.
it makes sense that they would be mistrusting. Why would you trust a voice that tells you you're not good enough? Why would you trust? And then if you have that going on and you have all this other fear stuff going on, then it makes sense, um, that people are feeling afraid.
Yeah.
And so the work that is really, like, I'm so called to do, is bridging that, right? And then okay, so it's atrophied, so you flex the muscle. You flex the muscle, you go back and you make mistakes, you put color on paper, you do, like, you start to play like you used to play as a child, without reserve, without thinking twice about it, like, I'm gonna fall off the tree, big fat hairy deal. They don't even think about falling off the tree. It's just climb up the tree, get the cherries. It's just like, there's that sense of playfulness and wonderment and joyful abandon
And
that can
no
happen in
judgment.
that space, and no judgment, exactly.
Uh-huh.
And then there's also the invitation to, like, listen to that voice that has been saying not good enough, not good enough. You can go like, thank you so much for your feedback, but I'm just going to keep on painting, I'm going to keep on playing. So there's this invitation to just say, like, yeah, I hear you. And you know what? You actually make sense, right? To get things done, you're great for that. But right now, we're not doing that. Right now, we're just going to listen to a different thing. We're going to so yeah. And all of this in the line of work that I do is really about engaging in relationships from a place of confidence, right? So it's about first developing that relationship with your own intuitive intelligence and source. And then from that place, engage in listening and acting on that voice, right? And then on that guidance, noticing, like, wow, this is actually working. Things are not blowing up in my life anymore. I can actually have these conversations with more ease and grace, and I can handle difficult conversations and know that, I won't self implode. Awesome. And so trust is developed. And therefore confidence is developed. And then all of a sudden you have, I don't know, people who are in relationships with other people who are acting like adults and not scared little children. Right? And this world, you know what, needs that, because you know what? Things are in a precarious place. The environment, like there are bigger things than just ourselves individually, right? And so we need adults who are capable of being able to engage as adults so they can actually be of service in the highest way possible in their lives, so they can have agency and they can leave a legacy that they've been wanting to but had not had access to until that point.
Yeah.
And creativity is definitely a way through.
Preaching to the choir with me. And I think that what I see in what you're saying, which is really so wonderful, is that and it's been my experience as well, is that when they understand the nature of creativity, that it isn't just about being artistic, but it's this form of expression that I also don't really like the word empowered, but I'm going to use it here anyway. It is a form of empowerment or freedom, inner freedom, that then translates into other aspects of our lives. So it's not just that we can approach a piece of paper with paint and not freak out, or write something if we have this opinion in our head that we're not writers, but it shows up in conversations with other people. It shows up in how we live our lives, how we have socially responsible conversations, how we extend ourselves to other people, how we get through other challenges in our life, because that capacity that you're referring to has become enlivened. And there's no way creativity can just be kept in a paint box. Once you got it, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we're on the road.
Well, I think what it allows, and I'm not so keen on the word empowerment myself, but what I think, what engaging in creative processes and being willing to challenge your own internal status quo, right? And rules and regulations and stories, and beginning to sort of update the what
Operating system.
operating systems. Thank you. I was thinking about a computer term and you totally came up with it. So it's like really updating that is really about when that can happen for an individual. The energy that they were expending on anxiety,
Right.
on not enoughness, on the stories they were projecting onto other people, their partners, their families of origin, their siblings, their boss, right? All that energy gets freed so they can actually see the person, so they can actually truly be present and engage and have a sense of intimacy, which is what they've been clamoring for the entire time, but had no availability or just room for. They couldn't even wrap their brain around it. So armored up were they.
Yeah.
That creativity has this capacity to, in one stroke at a time, like bring down the wall, so that level of intimacy that each human being wants to have with each other human being, which they want to have with creatures, with nature, with that's made available to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I wanted to address that you were just speaking of is that creativity is something, I think once we realize we have it ourselves and that we can express it in a way that's been up to a certain point squashed down, that everybody has that capacity, and that creativity is once we recognize that everybody has that potential, that's another level of connection. So it isn't only vertical, but it's horizontal as well. So it's multidimensional,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it can change our relationship in any moment. Because if you think about having a conversation with somebody and you go into it, let's say you don't know the person very well, and they seem kind of cranky to you or off-putting, or there's something you just don't resonate with them, and you're thinking, maybe I need to go have a cup of coffee now or something. But when you can realize that they're connected to the same source, they have the same potential as you do, as I do, it softens things. We get to look at people in a whole different way. They're not just this cardboard stick figure, but they have a dimensionality to them, and they have a depth to them that when we don't realize this capacity that we all share, it's easy to forget.
True. And um, I think that level of projection and judgment with somebody else, like, oh, they're having a bad day, I'm going to get out of here, have a cup of coffee, that kind of thing becomes less necessary
Yeah.
if you're seeing them
Yes.
and you're seeing somebody who's perhaps cranky, and there may be some reasons going on. Nothing to do with me. This is not mine. And yet that allows me the space as a creative, right, to look at, well, what's needed here? Do I need to contribute anything? What would be the most helpful situation here? But when you're looking at, the capacity to see everybody as a creative, I early in my coaching, um, I had the experience of, and it's how my coaching sort of evolved. I started off working with women transitioning from one job to another because I was unhappy as a teacher. And I figured if I could coach them out of their, transitioning from one place to another, then maybe I would learn something and I could leave teaching. And then later on, things evolved, and I had some, dark night of my soul. It was a relationship that fell apart, and had vowed never to be in a relationship again.
Those pesky relationships.
Pesky relationships, those things. And then realized, not that long after, sorry, I got a hair in my front of my face, but had not that long after, there's like, I love love. I want to be in love. I want to be intimate with someone. I want to be like sharing my life with someone who has the capacity to hold the totality of who I am,
Mhm.
right? Except this was the problem. I had judgments. I had like all these things about men that were just interfering with my capacity to see the creative nature of who they were.
Mm.
And so I took myself on this 9-month journey of doing research on them. And I signed up for, like, it was match.com, and I put myself out there, and I went on lots of dates, but I wouldn't go out on dates with these gentlemen unless they were forewarned that, one, I was not interested in a relationship. Two, I was doing research because I really didn't think well of them. And I was looking to change my mind
That's great.
about my beliefs about who they were. And so lots of them ran for the hills thinking I was really kind of crazy pants. But those that stuck, really, really, I learned so much from them. And I dated all kinds of guys, um, all kinds, for the purposes of, again, can I see the beauty in each man, whether he was a fit for me or not? Could I see, so like can you look at the creative nature of each individual? Because can I see the legendary love that he is? Can I see that inherent in him? And as I was going through this 9-month process, it's how I met my husband, by the way. He was one of my research projects.
Oh, that's great.
um, as I went through this process, not only did it transform my ability to see men differently, I saw that every man had, there weren't any men that didn't have that capacity that I dated, right? So, because you're going to have the 1 to 3% that are just like, they're it's just like you have the 1 to 3% of humans who just don't quite
Not
but
relevant to your research
not
project.
relevant to my research. And so I was really able to discover that every man had qualities in him that I desired in a partner.
Hmm.
So it allowed me to open up my creativity, right? My capacity to see more possibilities inherent in men than I was able to before, because as I shared earlier, the optimism thing or whatever we're talking, like looking through a pinhole, because that's how I was looking at the other gender. So when you're looking at creativity, it's like giving yourself permission to do research, to make mistakes, but the entire time be completely open, vulnerable, exposed, raw. Because that's when shifts happen, right? And so when we're looking at creativity and coaching, right, that's the invitation of doing research, donning your, and when I was coaching only women, I would say, put on your pink lab coat and boa with very long gloves and sparkly jewels and go out and do your research. But I think approaching life that way, approaching relationships in that way is creates more possibilities
Yeah.
for that connection and that intimacy that people are seeking.
That's wonderful. So let me ask you, since you use these words, vulnerable and raw, what do you think those things really are? Because most people hear the word vulnerable and they go, ah, no.
Yeah. Well, most people have been trained to think that vulnerability is weakness.
Right.
Whereas, and which is why they shy away from it, because it actually takes courage to be willing to be vulnerable. And I'm not saying vulnerable like you spray all over the place, right? Because that's not vulnerability. That's a whole different ball game. What I'm talking about is true, honest, open, sincere, genuine connection. By vulnerability, I mean you're not hiding, you're not concealing, you're not withholding. You're not shying away from difficult conversations. It's not that you're letting your guard down, but you're letting your guard down. And you have faith that you'll be safe, even when you're vulnerable. And that can leave you raw, feeling very exposed. And it can be somewhat of a challenging place to navigate. To be in that, like, oh, I just told something really truthful about myself. And then like, it opens up the space for like all the storyline, all of the habituated patterns and of behavior and thought to kind of flood right in and go right into like oh, that was so stupid, which do you think you do? Like you just made yourself really. But so part of this vulnerability piece in the work that I do is about knowing the individual can handle the sensations that occur somatically when you're in that vulnerable place. And in fact, it supports you in developing resiliency.
It's such an interesting topic, vulnerability, because first of all, the things that we think are going to hurt us are actually universal things that everybody struggles with. I'm going to be judged, or it doesn't sound right, or I don't want to appear that way, or somebody else hurt me and I don't want to be hurt again. But when you realize that incredible resiliency that we all have, that a lot of what we're telling ourselves is just not true. It goes back to what you were saying earlier about that innate resilience that we have. So all these stories about what it means to be vulnerable or really raw, what if we were using the wrong languaging for that? What if what was really happening was we were opening to connection, opening to one heart to another,
Yeah.
that there's nothing to fear, that we're all the same with our fears and our worries and our joys and what we want out of life. And we've been indoctrinated that, oh, don't be vulnerable, protect yourself, they can hurt you. But to know, as you're pointing to in your work, that we have this incredible inner resilience that's not personal, it's the ground of our being, but we've been taught that it is personal.
Mhm.
We have to protect ourselves. And yet that just limits us.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and it's exactly why, I use sort of a 7-step process with my clients, and we go deeply into those stories and to deconstructing those. And what I love, love, love about art and creativity is that it's really risky, is that it really allows you to play in that sandbox of vulnerability without getting hurt. Like, literally hurt. Like, you're not gonna break a foot or a finger, I mean, unless you trip over your easel or something. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like the risk, it feels like I'm at the edge of a cliff. There's that sensation of like, "Oh, bleep," right? Um, so it's the safest way to take a risk and to develop that relationship with the sensations of risk taking, of vulnerability, of feeling raw and exposed, of all of those things that will then open space for us to be intimate with one another.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. It's so beautiful. In the years that I was a teacher and a practitioner in energy medicine, the it became really clear when you're talking about the somatic experience that we just give labels to sensations in our bodies. Oh, this is fear. Oh, this is anger, or this is, fill in the blank. But what if they weren't? What if we are misinterpreting sensations? And I'm not talking about danger, but if I'm thinking this, what is this feeling in the pit of my stomach? Oh, I must be really afraid. But what if I'm really excited? And I've just been telling myself, or somebody else said, oh, that icky feeling you have in your stomach? You better pay attention to that. But
Yeah.
what if it's not? What if it's that energy just getting ready to be expressed? There's so much misunderstanding about our feelings and what it's like to be in our bodies. So the kind of work that you're doing sounds like such a good, I was going to say introduction, but more of an adventure or an investigation into what really is. And as my friend Kathleen would say, what's really possible? What else is possible?
Mhm. Mhm.
Who wants to live this kind of a life, that's in a little tiny box with 6 locks and rope around it
Yeah.
tied tightly?
Yeah.
Where you have the circumstances that you would think many people would say, well, because of that, that's the way I should live. And
Mhm.
yet, don't you think it's just the opposite?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think part of this is that we're only allowed socially to express certain kinds of emotions. And so therefore, when we have sensations, when other emotions come forward, we shut those things down. And we don't understand the architecture and the landscape of those sensations within our physical body.
Yeah.
And so when we give ourselves opportunities to spend time there, to understand like, ooh, it's starting, it feels like this wave. This is like it's starting here, and like, oh, and when it crescendos, this is where it moves in my body, and like, ooh, that's what it feels like when I'm in that place. And then when it leaves, oh, this is where it moves in my body. So there's we're not allowed that. I mean, like we're delegated to like 2 octaves of an 88 keys of a piano, right? And so part of this process I think is really important, is that if we're looking to be present to each other, which is like the biggest thing for me, this is about relationship, right? Starting with yourself, is that if you're looking for that level of intimacy and you're looking to access sort of creative solutions, then you need to understand that landscape within you, whether it's perceived as negative feelings, sensations, or positive feelings or sensations. Understanding the architecture and the landscape of that for yourself as an individual, because each person experiences it differently,
Mm.
will then allow you to recognize yourself when you're in it, then be able to say, oh, look at me, how adorable. I'm in this sensation right now. Gee, I wonder what's going up for me. What's the shame that's coming up for me right now? What's this that's coming? What's coming? And rather than just need to shut it down, let it go through,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? We're not going to self-combust.
Most
Again,
of us anyway.
most of us. And so I think that that's just really important. And that too is a creative process. The willingness to just, and it goes back to that raw place,
Mm.
right? A willingness to just say, approach those moments with a sense of curiosity
Mm.
and wonderment. Don your research lab on, put your boa on, right? Like, wow, this is so interesting. When I'm experiencing shame, I feel, this is what happens physiologically to me. Just really great data, awesome information. Because
And I'm
then,
sorry, go ahead.
no, because then what happens, because people misinterpret the signals and they put labels on what that means for them, and then they get to offload all the stuff that they've been stuffing down and not paying attention to on other people in their lives, which is completely unfair. So part of this is taking personal and energetic responsibility, which is that part of growing up, right? And acting like an adult in your life and in your relationships. So sorry,
Mm.
I got all preachy there for a son
No, that's all right. I'm
because
thinking
I'm big on responsibility.
I remember, my undergraduate training was in fine art, and I did a lot with it. And when I lived in New York, I had a calligraphy business and I had a floral design business, uh, and then I stopped and I had shifted gears for a while when I got into energy medicine. And then I decided to take some collage workshops with a woman in Massachusetts who's wonderful, Alexandra Sheldon. And the first few times I would take workshops with her, because I was going into unknown territory, I would get nauseous. And I didn't know what it was. I thought, oh, I must have eaten something, or, I didn't sleep well, or I'd have all these justifications for it. And at one point in the workshop, she said, a lot of people when they're first trying stuff, they literally get sick to their stomach. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
And the more I said, okay, so what? The process became easier and
Mhm.
easier and easier. And not that every once in a while I'll get that feeling, but it doesn't matter because I know it's just something that's along the road of expressing something that is in the unknown. and is just asking me to follow it
Mhm.
and see where it leads. And that's been, I wonder what will happen next.
Mhm. Yeah. So we can just see these as signals, right? It's like
Right,
guideposts.
right,
Like, oh, cool. This is so cool. I'm nauseous again. I
right.
think something exciting's going to happen,
That's
right?
right.
It's like, oh, I've been here before. So then it becomes normalized,
Right.
right? Not this like need to pre-avoid the high sensation. Like there's none of that. Like again, frees up more energy,
Yeah.
frees up so that you can be present to what is.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Benjamin Zander, the
Nope,
conductor, musical conductor?
no.
Quite an impassioned man. I think he must be in his 80s now. And he wrote a book called The Art of Possibility. Very effusive teacher and conductor and musician. And he would, large gestures and emphasis on whatever you're doing to encourage the sparkle in someone's eyes. And he encouraged his students when they were able to recognize that they had made a mistake in what they were trying to do, or the music they were trying to create, he would counsel them by saying, I want you to look at that and say, how fascinating. No judgment, just isn't that interesting? And if we all grew up with that, what a different world this would be.
Mhm,
We
mhm.
would have such a sense of collective joy about the process of creation that
Mm.
it would be heaven.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's never too late for a second run at life. So I think we can reparent ourselves
Yes.
and, and yeah, that's always available to us because we are creative by nature
Right.
and we have the capacity to change. Like neuroscience shows that we have until we die, we have the capacity to learn and change and shift. And so, like, hey, game on, game on.
Game's still on.
Right, game's still on. I mean, my grandmother, I have her picture right up here. She's with me, she's right here, she's over there. But at 79, decided she was going to go to university because she always wanted to. So at 81, she graduated in art history.
Mm.
And I thought, you know what? So she's a model for me of what can be done. And that age, there is no there's not an excuse there. Don't tell me you're too old, right? Don't tell me you can't change, because that is about creativity and about seeing things creatively, about seeing possibility for yourself, right? And knowing that that's absolutely 100% your birthright.
True, true, true. Oh, this has been a great conversation. I'm so glad you were able to come on today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciated this time together.
Thank you. Before we leave, can you tell us two things: what you're up to these days and where can people find you?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. um, what I'm up to these days. So through this whole pandemic thing, um, my intuitive intelligence has shown me that what's really needed is community. And what people are looking for is connection. And so I've developed a 6-month program that, by the way, just flung open its doors today. We start in the full moon in December for a 6-month program. So it's a program to support women and being able to. It's going to be for women exclusively, but to support them in having that sense of community, develop a sense of confidence, begin to listen to their intuitive intelligence, so then they can engage in their relationships that matter most with a sense of confidence.
Mm,
So it's sort of like that beginning, and to do it in community. And I have like 4 elements that are part of that. So the creative processes will be there. The, training calls will be there. That's part of what I do with my one-on-one clients. Our laser coaching stuff will be there. And then of course, time for them to get together and do things together with what I call their wing women.
They're what?
They're wing women.
Wing women.
So that research component that is so predominant in the work that I do, it's very much research based. And so I'm really excited about this. I'm really, really excited about this. So it's going to be running in early 2020. So I'm sort of handpicking the community right now. And
Nice.
that feels very exciting. But if anyone who's listening feels like this sounds, or what I've been talking about and have shared today feels resonant, then absolutely to contact me. So you can do that. My email is Joelle, Joelle, at joellelydon.com, JoelleLydon.com. You can also check my soon to be defunct and then soon to be new website, yourlovebydesign.com. So yeah, so I'm in the process of doing that. We're going to have a student portal in there. It's like so exciting.
Sounds
Yeah.
very juicy.
Yes, very, very juicy time for me. Yeah,
Mhm.
very exciting time.
Great. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you. I
I hope we
really
get to
enjoyed
have,
this very much.
thank you. I hope we get to have more of these conversations. And thank you all for watching. You can subscribe to my channel and see the next person as wonderful and talented as Joelle. And thank you again. We'll see you next time. Bye for
Beautiful.
now.
Thank you.
Thank you.